So over the last few days, American mainstream journalists have disgraced themselves to a degree that has not been seen since the last few days before that. In fact, American mainstream journalism has become a disgrace in every regard, with teams of reporters, editors, middle managers, and corporate leaders who all share the same opinion. There's no way for them to know that their biases are biases and not a simple objective look at reality. It's the school of, we're not biased, it's just that Republicans are Satan. There is no sin in making mistakes, especially in the 24/7 news cycle, but the intellectual corruption in the journalistic profession is now so deep that newsmen are incapable of seeing that their mistakes are not individual distinct incidents, but organic outgrowths of their overall dishonesty. They can do all the apologies, think pieces, and make-believe self-examination they want, but nothing will change until they do the one thing that's necessary: hire conservatives, not one or two sort of conservatives to serve as representatives of what those strange conservative people think, but enough genuine right-wingers to fill enough reportorial, editorial, and middle management seats to let all the Democrats who now fill those seats know when they are straying from fair play. Until they do that, they will remain what they have made themselves: enemies of fairness and truth, and therefore enemies of what's best for the American people. So NBC's Chuck Todd, who has now become just another one of these Democrat spokesmen pretending to be a journalist, he tweets after all the mistakes that they made over the last few days. He tweets, he was talking about the story that came out from BuzzFeed saying that Donald Trump had tried to suborn perjury by getting Michael Cohen to lie about some deal he was doing in Russia. Chuck Todd's tweets, those trying to tar all media today aren't interested in improving journalism, but protecting themselves. There's a lot more accountability in media these days than in our politics. We know we live in a glass house. We hope the folks we cover are as self-aware. This is total garbage. First of all, you have different jobs than the people you cover. Your job, politicians are fighting their corner. They're not supposed to be fair. They're supposed to fight for what they believe. You're supposed to be reporting fairly so Americans can make up their own minds. That is your role in a Democrat society, is to give information. You might say, you report, Chuck, we decide. And that is not what's happening. We talked about this BuzzFeed story last week, and that Trump suborned perjury, and I said, I didn't know whether it was true. How would I know? But I pointed out what made me suspicious about this story, but that didn't stop the mainstream media from taking this story from a very dubious source, BuzzFeed, and running with it. Well, let's play this montage, cut 3.
If this BuzzFeed News report is true, then we are likely on our way to possible impeachment proceedings.
If it were to be true, it means the president told someone to lie under oath, which very simply is a crime and is impeachable.
If this story is true, we must begin impeachment proceedings.
If you can prove that the president ordered it, that certainly rises to the level of impeachable offense.
We're going to know if the president of the United States committed a federal felony, and at that point we are in high crimes and misdemeanor, and we are in impeachment territory.
Right. Is that an impeachable offense?
This is suborning perjury. I think there's no question it's an impeachable offense.
That is considered an impeachable offense.
Absolutely. These are impeachable offenses.
Inside that answer, I did hear the I word, impeachable.
Impeachment is a very fine alternative way to deal with this.
Democrats will move maybe faster, maybe more aggressively toward impeachment.
So the House Majority Whip, James Clyburn, the Democrat, said, as long as you say, if this is true, you're covered. You're covered. Well, if it's true that James Clyburn is a child molester, that would be evil. If it's true that he cheats on his wife, that would be just a terrible thing. Of course, doesn't give you cover to say if it's true, if the story is unreliable. But this is not the problem. The problem is not that the story is unreliable. I understand it's a 24/7 news cycle. To add to this, of course, Robert Mueller, in an extraordinary moment, which he has not done anything like this before, he came out and said, this story is not true. So now the thing goes down the drain. Now the ship sinks, and they're stuck with all these if-true stories, right? And Brian Stelter has the reporter who covered it, Anthony Cormier, on with Ben Smith, the guy who runs BuzzFeed. And listen to this interview. He asked them all these questions, and they just dodge him.
I have further confirmation that this is right. We're being told to stand our ground. This is our reporting is going to be borne out to be accurate, and we're 100% behind it.
Who is telling you that?
Oh, I'm not going to talk about my sources. I got to be honest.
Sometimes I write stories and I say I have a number of sources. I actually have more than that, but I can't reveal how many I have. Is that what you're saying happened in this case? You had more than 2 sources?
Do that, but I think that you say what you say in the story and you stand by what you say in the story. I would say that something reporters sometimes do is they describe someone as a senior law enforcement official and they fudge that, and these senior administration official characterizations can be shady, and then sometimes that identity is revealed and you say, come on. And I just do want to say that in this story, in this case, these are very narrow, very strong descriptors.
Let me just ask about documents like the dossier. Anthony, you said on CNN on Friday that you had not seen the documents you described in the story. Jason Leopold said on MSNBC, we've seen documents. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, I can't really get into the details there.
So these guys got nothing. So Brian Stelter, before they come on, he announces that he's going to have them on. He tweets that he's going to have them on in a show which is called Reliable Sources. So I tweeted, that's great. Shouldn't you change the name of your show for this episode? And Stelter tweets back, well, shouldn't you watch the show first? The answer is no, because the problem is not the mistake. The problem is not that they ran with a false story. The problem is the bias. When I talked about this on this show, what I said was, you know, one of the things that bothers me about this story, and obviously I'm not a newsman, I'm a commentator, I'm giving you my opinion, but I said what bothers me is the FBI clearly overstepped its brief in their investigation of Donald Trump, and these leaks are obviously intended to cover that up, to reframe an unconstitutional breach by our intelligence services and spying, amazingly spying on a presidential campaign, which is absurd. And the problem is the press is not covering that story, and it didn't even occur to them to wonder whether that was going on, because that story doesn't exist in their minds, because they're all Democrats and there's no one there to say to them, hey, maybe this is a setup by an FBI that is trying to cover up. It's overstepping the Constitution. There's nobody there to say it, so they don't cover it. That's the problem. The problem is not that they talked about the BuzzFeed story. The problem is they had no context because they only see everything from one side. And it's the same thing with this absolutely shameful attack on these Catholic high school boys at Covington Catholic School in Kentucky, right? They're at the March for Life, and they're waiting for a bus, and a video comes out that seems to show this Native American guy is being harassed by these Catholic schoolboys, okay? That seems to show them, you know, making fun of him, and he's banging on his drum, and it seemed to be just a display of, Native American culture or whatever, and these boys are being, boys will be boys, teenagers, and all this stuff. So I'm playing the one from NBC, but all out through social media, and including conservatives who have not yet learned. Conservatives have not yet learned. They should be listening to the show to learn just how dishonest and how biased the press is. I mean, one of the problems we have here is that everybody wants to be in the press, right? Everybody knows the New York Times is a left-wing piece of trash at this point. The New York Times is left-wing garbage, but everybody wants that good review for his new novel or his new show. Everybody wants an interview in the New York Times so he can spread out his audience. And nobody is going to say, oh, these guys lie all the time. And again, it is not lying because, we're sinister, terrible people. It becomes sinister, it becomes terrible, but it's lying because they're surrounded by people who agree with them. And when that happens, there is no one to question their assumptions. So here's NBC going after these poor kids with an incredibly biased story, which when I put this up this morning, when I was covering this morning, they had not yet retracted.
Troubling scene many are calling racist played out in Washington yesterday on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Some students harassing an older Native American man, a Vietnam vet, in the midst of a special ceremony. Tammy Leitner has more.
It was meant to be a time for Indigenous people to be seen and heard. But this viral video taken during Friday's rally in Washington has sparked outrage and confusion. The video appears to show dozens of youths wearing Make America Great Again hats, mocking Native American elder and Vietnam veteran Nathan Phillips, many jeering and others looking on.
I was there singing, and I heard them saying, build that wall, build that wall. This is indigenous lands. We're not supposed to have walls here. We never did for a millennium.
Once again, the story blows up in the faces of the media. When you see the larger video, and especially a larger video from a different angle, you see that the kids are just standing around. They're waiting for a bus. There's a group, a kind of radical group of people shouting horrible things at them, calling them names, using gay slurs to shout at them. And then this guy, the Native American guy, gets in their face, banging their drum in the face. Clear provocation. They did not approach him. And the kids, as they later said themselves, were just confused. They thought, oh, it must be some kind of indigenous display of culture. And they started chanting along and playing along. And then in the end, the kid just did, when he realized he was being harassed, he just sat there with a pleasant, what he felt was a pleasant smile on his face. And so they got ripped for being these smug, white guys with that face. What did Reza Aslan, the Iranian writer, said? Serious question. Have you ever seen a more punchable face than this kid? He's talking about a teenager. He's talking about punching a teenager. A lot of people have apologized and a lot of people have pulled their tweets down and stuff like that. But a lot of people haven't and have still tried to make some kind of moral equivalence. This guy, this Native American guy, it was a con job from the start. He called them beasts. He said all kinds of terrible things about them. But again, it is not the mistake. Think about the last clip you saw in that NBC thing where the guy says, this is indigenous land. He's standing in Washington, D.C. It hasn't been indigenous land for hundreds of years. This is a nation called the United States of America. It is not Native American land. He's got the tears and where they're going, like that old ad, that old environmental ad with the chief with a single tear running down his face. There's not supposed to be walls in indigenous land. What the hell is he talking about? This is a major industrialized nation. Of course there should be walls and protection on its borders. We're not living. It's like this. We're living in Dances with Wolves. It's like hundreds of years ago. It is not that country anymore. But the bias, because that kind of virtue signaling works with left-wingers, and because every single person is a left-winger, it didn't occur to anybody to turn to the other and say, this guy's full of crap. That statement he made is full of crap. We shouldn't include this. We should look more closely at this. They ran with it because of the bias. My point is not to pick on them for mistakes. That's what everybody's talking about. My point is to say that these mistakes grow organically out of the fact that they are all of one party. They think they're not. They think even though we're Democrats, we can be fair. They can't, because when you only associate with people who agree with you, you basically become more radicalized. You become more certain of your opinions because there's no one there. I mean, I was in journalism. I remember people checking on you because they disagreed with you, saying that's not fair what you said there, and you had to answer to them. That is gone. The journalism is so corrupt because it is all one-sided. I just want to end with something that Sean Hannity did, because I just think it was really well done and really powerful. And obviously, Sean, another opinion guy. But this is the point. He was talking about the coverage of the border controversy. And he put two montages together. And the first one was a montage of Democrats reacting to Donald Trump proclaiming the border situation a crisis because of all the families coming in. So this is cut number 10.
President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis.
This is a manufactured crisis. No crisis exists, and anyone making the argument is most likely guilty of fear-mongering and willfully misleading the American people.
Locals will tell him on the border, even conservatives, is that there isn't a national security crisis.
The notion that we have a crisis there, a security crisis, is absolute nonsense.
This is a manufactured crisis, and a crisis that manufactured by the Trump administration.
This artificial crisis of the president isn't going to justify his appropriating money for a wall that Congress is unwilling to give.
Is there a crisis at the border? The president said there's a humanitarian crisis at the border. Is there?
Absolutely not. We have a challenge. All our humanitarian issues are challenges for us.
All right. Again, this is compiled by Sean Hannity. That's the Democrats. Here's the press.
The big scam of the whole address was that there's a crisis. There's not a crisis.
Folks, the president has manufactured one heck of a political crisis for himself.
Donald Trump is manufacturing a national security crisis.
You will hear them say is that this is a manufactured crisis. It's not a national security crisis.
It remains a Seinfeld shutdown, all about nothing.
What happens when there is a real crisis? When there is a real emergency? Does he take to the airwaves? Do we give him the airwaves? Do we believe him?
Some question if there is a crisis at all, as the president has claimed.
There is not a crisis at the border. It's a manufactured crisis for the president to get a political win.
Crisis can have, as we see now, a very elastic definition.
He's determined to convince you there is a crisis at the border, even though an intelligence official tells CNN, quote, no one is saying this is a crisis except them.
It's hard to know whether the press is taking its talking points from the Democrats or the Democrats are taking their talking points from the press. The problem is they're the same people, so it doesn't really matter. I do not understand at this point, I really don't, how any honest person can go to work at these places and not realize that this is treating the American public unfairly. It is incredibly divisive. I would say it, along with Roe v. Wade, is at the center of our divisions, because what it does is it angers right-wingers by making them feel they're not represented on comedy shows, in movies, on television shows, or in the news media. And it gives license to left-wingers to demonize us, to think, oh, well, they're just racist, because that's what they're hearing all the time. So they don't have to talk to us. They don't have to listen to our opinions. They don't have to reconcile their own ideas with the facts. It really is wrong, and it could be so easily fixed. 3 words: hire some conservatives.